The scent of old paper and fresh coffee, usually the comforting perfume of my routine at the publishing house, had been replaced by a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. There, in the top-floor, glass-walled conference room, my future was being decided, and it wasn't looking good. On my side of the immense mahogany table, there was me. On the other, the owner of Veridian Books, Mr. Harrison, a man whose passion for literature was surpassed only by his disdain for financial losses. And next to him, wearing a thin, victorious smile, was Megan. Megan, our head of acquisitions, swiped through a tablet with the calm of a predator that has already cornered its prey. The prey, in this case, was me. She didn't look at me. She looked at Mr. Harrison, delivering her venom in the form of market metrics and sales projections. Clara is an excellent editor, don't get me wrong, she said with that false modesty that made my stomach churn. But her approach, it's too boutique, too romantic. She's putting passion ahead of profit, and on 3 major projects, her slow process and niche choices are costing us a fortune. Every word was a calculated stab. I could see months of her work culminating in this single moment. She had finally done it. She had cornered me in front of the only person who could end my career with a single signature. Before I tell you how this meeting, which was supposed to be my end, turned into the biggest nightmare of her life, I want to ask you a favor. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because your story might be similar to mine. And if you believe in the power of truth, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell, because what happened in that room redefined the concept of workplace justice. My name is Clara, and I've been an editor at Veridian Books for nearly a decade. To me, a book has never been just a product. It's a soul printed on paper, a voice that travels through time. My job isn't just to fix commas or pick a pretty cover. It's to unearth raw talent, to find authors who have a unique story to tell, but don't yet know how. It's a job of patience, of mentorship, of polishing a diamond until it reveals all its brilliance. Megan arrived 2 years ago, straight from Wall Street, armed with an MBA and a vocabulary full of corporate buzzwords. To her, a book didn't have a soul. It had market potential, a target demographic, and an ROI curve. From day one, she made it clear she saw my approach as a relic of a romantic, inefficient past. She couldn't understand why I'd spend months working on a single manuscript with a debut author. She saw no value in discovering a poet from the Midwest who would never sell like a self-help guru. Success for Megan was immediate, loud, and quantifiable. My successes were quiet. A book I edited might not hit the bestseller list in its first week, but it would become required reading in universities 5 years later. An author I discovered would win a national book award, but without the mainstream media frenzy. And my quiet way of working drove her crazy. She couldn't compete with a legacy. She only knew how to compete with quarterly numbers. So she began to undermine me. She'd show up at pitch meetings with spreadsheets, questioning the commercial appeal of a story I was passionately defending. She'd send emails to Mr. Harrison, with me CC'd, suggesting more aggressive cover designs for my books, always using the most generic American bestsellers as examples. What really bothered her was the intangible, the respect the authors had for me, the loyalty, the way they saw me not as an executive, but as a partner in their art. That she couldn't buy or measure. So she decided that if she was so desperate to find proof of my inefficiency, would give her a feast. While Megan was assembling her arsenal of spreadsheets and loss reports, I started a side project, something that had nothing to do with numbers, but everything to do with the real value of our work. I created what I privately called the Veridian Legacy Project. It wasn't an official document, just a password-protected folder on my computer where I began to document the intangible. Every time one of my risky investments, as Megan liked to call my authors, generated a result that couldn't be measured in dollars, I recorded it. I started saving emails, not the negotiation emails, but the thank you notes. A young author from a small town in Oregon who was about to give up writing sent me a message saying my notes on his manuscript had given him the strength to go on. You made me believe my voice mattered, Clara. That's priceless. I saved the email as a PDF, timestamped. I started recording short audio clips, with the author's permission, of course. I'd record their reaction to seeing the first printed proof of their book, the emotional cry of a 70-year-old woman publishing her first novel, the trembling voice of a young man from a rough neighborhood in Chicago who was becoming the first in his family to have a book with his name on the cover. I documented everything. But the most crucial part of the Legacy Project was a section called Collateral Impact. In it, I tracked what happened after the books were published. One of my authors, a psychologist, had written a book on grief that Megan had labeled commercially unviable. Weeks after its release, I started getting emails from readers. A man wrote that the book helped him process the loss of his wife. A young woman said she gave the book to her mother, and it opened a dialogue that saved their relationship. I compiled these anonymous testimonials, creating a powerful dossier of our work's human impact. For every author Megan labeled a loss, I had a folder filled with evidence of their true value. The Legacy Project wasn't an attack on Megan. It was a passionate defense of my philosophy. I wasn't gathering evidence against Megan. I was gathering evidence of the power of literature. While she measured success by how quickly a book flew off the shelf, I measured it by how deeply it touched someone's life. And I knew that at some point, these two definitions of success would collide. What I didn't know was that my project, created to celebrate the soul of books, would become the most devastating weapon anyone had ever seen at that publishing house. And amid all that material, one name was conspicuously absent. In 2 years of the project, Megan's name never once appeared in connection with a single gesture of inspiration, mentorship, or positive human impact. Not once. If you're already cheering for this trap to work, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the conclusion of this story. Megan's voice echoed in the room, every word polished and sharp. She projected a chart on the giant screen on the wall. Red lines pointed downward. As you can see, the 3 projects led by Clara, the historical novel, the poetry collection, and the investigative journalism book, had production costs 30% above average, and after 6 months have sold less than 40% of their initial print run. That is a direct loss of over $200,000. Mr. Harrison furrowed his brow, his gaze fixed on the red numbers. This was his world, the language he understood. I could feel the ground opening up beneath me. Trying to argue about intangible value at that moment would just sound like desperation. He turned to me, disappointment clear on his face. "Clara, what do you have to say about this?" I maintained a calm I didn't feel. I took a deep breath. "Mr. Harrison, Megan's numbers are correct. They show a snapshot in time, but they don't tell the whole story." Megan let out a dismissive little laugh. "Here comes the story." I ignored her. "I also brought some data to this meeting," I said, opening my laptop. "But my data is a little different." I connected my laptop to the screen, and Megan's spreadsheet was replaced by the simple interface of my folder, the Veridian Legacy Project. Mr. Harrison leaned in, curious. Megan stopped smiling. "What is this?" he asked. "It's a project I've been developing for the past 2 years. I call it an impact dossier. It measures the return on investment that doesn't show up on financial reports."
I opened the folder for the historical novel Megan had just eviscerated. On the screen, emails and social media screenshots appeared. This book has been adopted as supplementary reading in 7 history courses at major universities, including 2 in the Ivy League. The author has been invited to give paid lectures in 3 states, promoting the Veridian Books name. Here's an email from a dean thanking us for the publication. The silence in the room grew heavy. Megan was pale. I opened the folder for the poetry collection. The author won a prestigious regional literary prize, which got us a full-page feature in a major city newspaper. The print run didn't sell out, true, But the reputation this publication brought to our house as a press that bets on new talent is immeasurable. Then I opened the folder for the investigative journalism book, and I clicked on an audio file. The emotional voice of a reader, a father, filled the room. And I wanted to thank you because the story in this book made me seek help. It made me understand I wasn't alone. You didn't just publish a book, you saved a life. Mine. Mr. Harrison stared at the screen, mesmerized. He was no longer seeing an executive. He was seeing the bookseller he once was, the man who founded the publishing house for the love of words. He turned to me, and for the first time that day, I saw respect in his eyes, not disappointment. "Clara," he said, his voice low, "continue. Show me more." For nearly half an hour, the conference room transformed into a gallery of human stories. I navigated through the Legacy Project, showcasing not just the 3 projects Megan had attacked, but dozens of others. There were photos of my authors at local book fairs, surrounded by enthusiastic readers. There were screenshots from online book clubs passionately debating the endings of my publications. There were handwritten letters from high school teachers thanking us for providing material that finally got their students interested in reading. Each file was a piece of a mosaic that painted a completely different picture of success. It wasn't about selling fast, it was about lasting. It wasn't about immediate profits, it was about building a legacy of cultural relevance for Veridian Books. When I finished, the silence was absolute. Mr. Harrison was leaning back in his chair, staring at a fixed point on the wall, as if he were reevaluating everything he'd believed about his own business for the past few years. Megan, on the other hand, seemed to have shrunk. Her arrogant posture was gone, replaced by a poorly disguised desperation. She tried to intervene. This is all very nice, very touching, but it doesn't pay the bills. It's just anecdotes." It was the wrong word to use. Mr. Harrison turned to her, and his gaze was pure ice. "Anecdotes, Megan? My company was founded on anecdotes. It was founded on the belief that a single story can change a life. You, with all your market expertise, seem to have forgotten the most fundamental thing about what we do here." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "You brought me a report on what we're losing. Clara brought me a report on what we're gaining. And her gain is the reason I still love this job." Those words were the final sentence. He turned to me. "Clara, as of today, I want this legacy project to become an official metric in this company. I want an impact report for every book we publish. You'll be in charge of this new legacy and impact department, reporting directly to me." A knot of relief and triumph dissolved in my chest. Then Mr. Harrison looked at Megan. "And Megan," he said with terrifying calm, "while Clara was building bridges with our authors and readers, what exactly were you building? Besides, of course, a case to fire one of our most valuable editors." The irony was overwhelming. The weapon she had forged to destroy me, the meeting with the boss, the data, the pressure, had become the stage where my work philosophy was not just validated, but glorified. She gave me the perfect opportunity to prove my worth in the only way that mattered. Her attempt to expose me as a failure ended up exposing her as an executive with a hollow, soulless vision. I thought that would be the end of the story. I thought that after such a public humiliation, Megan would retreat, maybe even request a transfer. I underestimated her capacity for shamelessness, and more importantly, her thirst for revenge. She didn't retreat. She changed tactics. The first week was strangely silent. Megan avoided me in the hallways and in meetings, her face an impenetrable mask. I was too busy setting up my new department and accepting congratulations from colleagues to worry about her. That was a mistake. The first sign that something was wrong came from one of my youngest authors, Leo. He called me, his voice hesitant. "Clara, sorry to ask, but that file you put together, it has our personal information in it, right?" I was confused.
It has the emails you sent me, the testimonials you authorized. Why? He paused. It's just, Megan called me. She said she was doing a GDPR compliance audit. She asked if I was aware of how my data was being stored, if I had signed a specific consent form for this emotional marketing database, as she called it. Ice shot through my veins. Emotional marketing database? Yeah, Leo said. She made it sound exploitative, like you were using our personal stories for your own benefit to promote yourself without the proper legal framework. She planted a seed of doubt, you know? She said a thank you email isn't a legal document, and using it in a corporate presentation could be a serious breach. Her plan revealed itself in all its malice. Megan could no longer attack my competence, so she would attack my character. She would try to turn my greatest strength, my connection with authors, into my greatest weakness. She would paint me not as a mentor, but as a manipulator who exploited her artist's vulnerability to build a personal empire within the company. In the following days, the offensive intensified. I heard she was talking to the legal department, that she was suggesting new communication protocols that would, in practice, bury my relationships with authors under a mountain of bureaucracy and cold formality. She was no longer trying to get me fired. She was trying to cage me, to turn me into a cold, distant executive just like her, cutting off the very source of my magic. The war wasn't over. It had just gotten dirtier. Megan's poison was slow and subtle. She made no direct accusations, only raised concerns in meetings and hallway conversations. Doubt was her weapon, and I could feel the atmosphere around me starting to shift. The admiration from some colleagues gave way to cautious glances. The bureaucracy began to increase. I had two choices: engage in a legal battle, which would drag me onto her turf, or do something she would never expect. I chose the latter. The following Monday, I had a meeting, not with the board, but with the most important people at Veridian Books, every author with an active contract. I used my new department's budget to fly them to New York for what I called the first Veridian Author Symposium, Building the Future of Literature. Megan and the rest of the board were invited, of course. They couldn't refuse. On the auditorium stage, with over 50 authors in the audience, I projected The Legacy Project onto the big screen. But this time, I didn't use it to defend myself. I opened it up to them. For the past few years, I've kept a record of the impact your work has on the world. I called it The Legacy Project. Recently, some legitimate concerns have been raised about privacy and how these stories are used, and I agree that this conversation is essential. I looked directly at Megan, who was sitting in the front row with a faint smirk, thinking I was walking right into her trap. This archive, I continued, was never about me. It was always about you, and therefore it shouldn't belong to me or the company. It should belong to our community. Today, I'm proposing that we turn this archive into a collaborative platform, a platform where you, the authors, will have full control over what is shared. You can upload your own testimonials, connect with readers, and measure your work's impact in the way you find most meaningful. The room was silent for a moment. Then it erupted, not in applause, but in a murmur of excitement. The idea of a community, of a mutual support network, was everything they had ever wanted. The perfect revenge is being built, and if you don't want to miss the final blow, now is the time to subscribe to the channel. Then came the checkmate. To kick off this new era of transparency, I'd like to share with you the feedback we've received internally about the value of your work. And with the help of the IT team, I projected two documents on the screen, side by side. On one side, excerpts from my legacy project, with its stories of impact. On the other, anonymized but unmistakable, Megan's financial loss reports and emails criticizing the same projects, describing them as commercially unviable, too romantic, and a loss for the company. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The entire audience of authors, the very soul of the publishing house, saw with their own eyes who fought for them and who saw them as mere numbers on a spreadsheet. They saw who believed in their art and who despised it. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. A renowned author, an elderly man who was a pillar of the press, stood up. "Clara, I've worked with Veridian Books for 20 years. Today, for the first time, I feel like we have a partner who speaks our language. And with all due respect to the board, I don't feel comfortable working with someone who views my life's work as a loss." One by one, other authors spoke up, echoing the sentiment. It wasn't an attack on Megan, it was a passionate defense of a worldview. Megan sat there, motionless, her face drained of all color as the community she tried to poison united against the philosophy she represented. That afternoon, Mr. Harrison called her into his office. There was no shouting, just a quiet conversation. The next morning, her chair was empty. A corporate email announced that Megan had decided to pursue new market opportunities. She wasn't fired. She was made irrelevant. In a company whose greatest asset was the trust of its authors, she had become a toxic liability. She tried to isolate me, but she ended up isolating herself from the heart of the company. 2 years have passed. The collaborative platform born from that symposium, named the Authors Hub, has transformed Veridian Books. It's become our greatest asset. Authors from all over the country want to publish with us, not for the advance, but to be part of a community that values art over commerce. The profits, ironically, have never been higher. I never heard from Megan again. Sometimes I wonder if she learned anything. Probably not. People like her don't see the world, only the reflection of their own ambitions in a mirror. My legacy project was that mirror, and the image it showed was so empty she couldn't stand to look at it. My revenge wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of creation. I didn't need to tear Megan down. I built something so strong, so positive, and so true around me that her space, based on negativity and cynicism, simply ceased to exist. She wasn't cast out. She became incompatible with the ecosystem we helped create. The lesson that remains, which I carry with me every day, is that the best defense against toxicity isn't to attack. It's integrity. It's building your own worth so solidly that no lie can shake it. It's creating a garden so vibrant that the weeds simply can't find any light to grow. If this story traveled to you and touched you in some way, let me know in the comments what city or country you're watching from. Knowing how far these journeys reach means the world to me. And if you believe that authenticity is the greatest weapon we have, please give this video a like. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more stories of women who, instead of playing by someone else's rules, decided to create their own.